I couldn't work at Cornwall Regional right now. I'm going to go crazy.
It's 3 years and counting since the start of the restoration project for the Cornwall Regional Hospital. But is there an end in sight? Then Western Jamaica and the COVID worry. Hello, I'm Damian Mitchell, and thank you for joining us for this special Gleaner Editors Forum. Today, we're homing in on two big issues: the protracted restoration project for the Cornwall Regional Hospital and the COVID worry in Western Jamaica. We're joined by the Health and Wellness Minister, Dr. Christopher Tufton, Gloria Henry of the Business Process Industry Association of Jamaica, Dr. Christopher Ogunsalo, Senior Lecturer, Faculty of Medical Science at the UWI. Calvin G. Brown is a former board chairman at Cornwall Regional Hospital, and we also do have Angela Witter, businesswoman and philanthropist. Thank you so very much for joining us. Dr. Tufton, let's therefore begin with you. What's the latest in respect of the restoration of the Cornwall Regional Hospital, which should have been completed at the very least a year ago?
On the issue of the provision of services, I am pleased and indeed proud of the team on the ground, the Regional Health Authority, the doctors, nurses, and support staff, because despite the challenges as it relates to the main building, service provisions have been substantially maintained. And indeed, even during this period, we have seen additional services in terms of greater access to certain types of services, like, for example, oncology or cancer treatment. So from that perspective, I think that we have done well, and credit to the team on the ground. From the perspective of the rehabilitation of the main building, I think there are challenges, and indeed, I dare say that we have learned a number of lessons coming out of a number of delays. And I would go as far as to say we have failed in a number of respects. Certainly failed as it relates to the delivery of the project, or where we should be at this point in time, because you're right, I think we're experiencing over a year in delays. Not that it would have been completed, but we should have been further ahead. There are a number of reasons for this. First of all, the scope of the work at Cornwall has changed fairly significantly from what it was originally intended when we started out on this trajectory. What started off as an initial scope of work for rehabilitation of an HVAC system, which would have affected primarily the third floor, was revised to incorporate floors 4 and 5, and then further revised to include findings from an assessment study carried out by a civil structural engineer entity that looked at mechanical, electrical, and plumbing works that had to be done. That morphed further in a number of other issues, including compromised beam structures, the need for retaining walls, removal of the chimney system that went up through the building. So all told, what we started out with has substantially changed over the period of time, which meant a series of technical revisions, a series of adjustments to scope of work, and the net effect, of course, as you have correctly pointed out, have been time delays. Now, there are other issues that I think can be attributed to the failures that we have experienced in the rehabilitation of the building. I think we underestimated the extent to which the project management capacity for a hospital requires experience and maybe more experience as a substantial point, but more technical application. The truth is that a part of the challenge has been the project management function of this brownfield site.
Well, let me ask then, Dr. Tufton, has this been corrected?
Well, I'm getting there. Project management has been a major issue, which has seen revised estimates several times over. And as a consequence, cost overruns and time overruns. In addition to that, we have had active hospital compound, which while we're building, we have had to be providing services. And this has led to some of the delays because it's difficult to build or to reconstruct in an active hospital context. The project management, my concern right now is that we have to shake things up and fairly substantially. And I'm actually going to cabinet to make a proposal as to what this shake-up will mean. It has to start with, I think, looking for improved capacity at the level of project management, meaning finding entities or capacities with experience in hospital build-out. And it's important not just for Cornwall, but also for the significant number of capital expenditures, capital projects that we have slated for the next 3 to 5 years. The truth is, we have not built a hospital in Jamaica for nearly 30 years. And
Yes.
a hospital is not an apartment building. It involves a lot more complicated moving parts, airflow, sanitization issues, and we just don't have the local experience.
And how much is this delay costing the Jamaican people, though, Dr. Tufton?
It's going to cost a number of millions of dollars in terms of the hard infrastructure. I don't think it's costing them anything in terms of access to healthcare in the parish or the region. Because as I said before, I am very pleased with the extent to which the service provisions have been maintained, not just at Cornwall, by the way, but shared between Cornwall and Falmouth, where we have electives and even Noel homes. But there's no doubt that we have learned a lot, are a lot wiser for what has happened at Cornwall based on the mistakes, or not mistakes, but based on the experiences of the attempts at rehabilitation of this building. And there's no doubt that we have had issues, and a shakeup is required to bring in external, I would say overseas expertise around the project management, and certainly in the final phase, go to the international market to bring in contractors who have experience in hospital build-out, because that, I think, has been a big part of the challenge. Too many recalibrations, too many re-evaluations, too many variations. And I believe, it's a personal opinion, based on all that I've heard and seen, it is substantially a function of inexperience. And that is as frank as I can get as it relates to the main building. And
so it sounds like we're back at one then, Dr. Tufton.
No, I would never say that. In fact, I would challenge that. I think we are a lot wiser for the experiences of Cornwall, because the evaluations and the variations that have occurred have taught us valuable lessons. What I am going to seek from Cabinet is the need to bring in external help in terms of the project management side. I think that will be useful not just for Cornwall, but it will be useful for the other projects. Remember now, we have the University Hospital of the West Indies expansion on the drawing board. We have the Spanish Town expansion, St. Anne's Bay, Maypen, and also a new hospital that is being slated to be built somewhere in the St. Catherine Plains. All of this would represent a very significant overhauling of public health infrastructure, which we have not done anything near to this in 30 years. So I'm not suggesting that our contractors and project managers aren't good at what they do. I'm suggesting that they have had very little, if any, experience in hospital build-out. And we have paid the price for that, frankly speaking, at Cornwall.
Well, we want to move into the issue of the COVID-19 and the war in Western Jamaica. But just before that, Calvin G. Brown is former board chair of the Cornwall Regional Hospital. And I want to ask him whether he's heard anything to inspire confidence in respect of Restoration Cornwall. Mr. Brown?
I know that the minister has a very tall task in respect of what he has to do, because I did not hear where there are any plans for expansion. Now, as the minister indicated, the Cornwall Regional building, that building was built in 1972. It was opened in 1974. It was built to accommodate 400 beds at that time. Some 35, 40 years later, the building is gutted and we plan to put back 400 beds. with a population that has expanded nearly 3 times. We need to look at what we're doing. We need to plan for it. I appreciate the fact that the minister had not appreciated the extent to which the, the problems would metastasize in respect of rebuilding the facility. But right now, I think he needs to look at, if you put back a 400-bed hospital there, what will you have in a facility that was an environment that is growing in leaps and bounds? And don't
So
forget,
then let's ask the minister the question again. Are we not back at one, Dr. Tufton?
No, we're not. I think we have made significant progress. I am prepared to accept and admit that we have paid a price for learning. And in that regard, we must take responsibility, and I take responsibility. And what we must do is learn from it, which is why I say we need external support as it relates to the project. But as it relates to the concern raised by the gentleman, I'm sorry, the name slips me.
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Calvin Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Brown, right. The build out of public health infrastructure in keeping with the 10-year development plan that we unveiled last year has to be viewed in a networked, holistic way. While it is true that we're putting a 400 bed in the context of significant population changes, bear in mind too that we are building a brand new hospital on the same compound. This is a gift from the Chinese government, which has broken ground. And that is an adolescent and pediatric hospital, which will take from 0 to 18 years old patients, and therefore take a lot of the burden in that age cohort from Cornwall. In addition, expansion has taken place at Falmouth, which initially was a 75-bed just prior to Cornwall's collapse, and now is numbering about 150 beds. The Cornwall Regional is a referral hospital, so some of the bed space was taken up by the need to provide specialist care from other parishes, but many of these parishes now will benefit from expansion.
We're fast running out of time, Dr. Tufton, and we must address the issue of the COVID worry in Western Jamaica. So let me ask you the question. Why did the authorities ease in enforcing the protocols, certainly as it relates to COVID-19 in Jamaica, and the West in particular?
Ease? I mean, what do you mean ease when you say ease?
Well, I've heard you in Parliament citing that there has frankly been lack of respect for the protocols with bike parties and yes.
Right.
So why did the authorities ease with the enforcement of these protocols?
No, the authorities have not eased. The fact is that we are fast approaching a time of year when culturally we're accustomed to a heightened or increased levels of activity in certain areas, part of our own social fabric. The season normally sees more outings, more shopping, more merrymaking, more opportunities for economic, activities and so on. All the protocols, in fact, the protocols have been tightened, announced by the PM, and enforcements continue. But the sheer number or the temptation to engage in the traditional activities around Christmas makes it that much more difficult for enforcement agencies, law enforcement. And in addition to that, we've seen some uptick in levels of crime, which clearly means a distraction from some of the protocol enforcements. And all of that has contributed, I believe, to an uptick in the numbers. It is worrying, it's very concerning, but I would say, in a sense, if there's an absence of personal responsibility, there is no authority that is going to be able to maintain levels of enforcement to keep the situation under full control.
I think Janet Silvera is trying to come in with a question, but just before that, could therefore the imposition of the restrictions extend beyond Westmoreland? The further restrictions?
Of course. In fact, the Westmoreland is ground zero now because of the sheer numbers and the hospital being under pressure. But the belt from Hanover, St. James, Trelawney into St. Anne also represents points of concern for us. And a lot depends on what the numbers look like, what the projections say, and how much people comply. It's very fluid, but it's a situation that we're monitoring and will comment more definitively on as time progresses.
Janet, go ahead, please.
My question goes right back to Cornwall Regional Hospital. What is the cost to date of the rental of all off-site locations that are being used as a result of what is happening at the hospital?
I can't give you a breakout of cost. I can try and work on that, but I think we have spent just over $1 billion over the period of time. And I think maybe a cost of rental is a part of that. I think probably 1.2 billion over those years. I'll have to check to see how it is broken out. What I will say though, is that when we started, a lot more services were outsourced than currently, which is why I say that on the side of service provision, I think the hospital management and staff have done well because they have been able to create both temporary and permanent structures on the compound of Cornwall. So the Mount Salem Clinic has been doubled in capacity to become an A&E. It's now being used as a COVID ward. We are putting our own diagnostic services. So a building was constructed, and instead of outsourcing diagnostic, it's now happening there. The dialysis unit is up and running and functional and serving, thousands of people of treatments, and I could go on. So we have seen a lot more of the service consolidated on the compound than in the early stages, but it still is a challenge because it's stressful to the staff, and there is still some outsourcing, like at Falmouth Hospital, where electives are done, and periodically we have to outsource other types of services.
Well, just one quick question. Let's try to bring in Dr. Ogunsalo here before you have to go, Dr. Tufton. What do you reckon, Dr. Ogunsalo, is at stake with the continued delay in project restoration at Cornwall?
I would say that there has been a big mistake in the entire restoration and also the exit of services from the main building of the Cornwall Regional Hospital. And the mistake is that everything has been highly politicalized. And when things happen like that, then you will always need calibration, variations, and recalculations. Like the minister himself admitted that this is what is happening. And all this is going to create a big gap in the restoration process. Now, all of you might remember that I came out very early in all these exercise and offered an advice to Jamaica that the University of the West Indies must purchase Cornwall Regional. The government should have offered Cornwall Regional to the University of the West Indies instead of spending all these billions of dollars running around the circle. And yes, services are maintained. The services are maintained because you have very vibrant staff. I couldn't work at Cornwall Regional right now. I'm gonna go crazy. And I'm telling you the truth. I'm not like that, And I have my colleagues that I left at Cornwall Regional still working hard with Cornwall Regional. These are the people that have maintained Cornwall Regional, not the government. Now, if Cornwall Regional is not going to be sold to the University of the West Indies, for example, then bring in a foreign buyer like St. Luke Hospital and so on and so forth. Let them buy the structure and let them turn it into a teaching hospital, which will compete with UE in providing education, research, and patient management. Now,
Dr. Tufton, any response to that?
I'm not finished, almost done. If this is done annually, Cornwall Regional Hospital will bring in more than the minister is saying that is being spent over this period. And It is wrong to manage patients in circle. It is wrong to admit that there are mistakes. You can't make mistake with health. You can't make mistake with management of patient care or the administrative structure and the facility. Everything has to be sound. And in my conclusion, this project is politicalized. And I am sorry, I hope I'm not hurting anybody. I'm very friendly to everybody, but I am very blunt.
Let's have the minister respond to that. Dr. Tufton?
Well, first of all, those suggestions are bordering on absurdity, frankly speaking. The truth is that any suggestion about selling Cornwall is contrary to government policy, and Cornwall being used as an income-generating facility is contrary to government policy. This is an institution that provides services free of cost in keeping with our healthcare policy. It is vital to the region, and frankly speaking, the distinction needs to be made between making a mistake with patients' lives or health and any errors that may have been made or lessons learned on the building, which is why I made the clarification earlier. Cornwall Regional, as a service provider, has not made any mistakes. In fact, the team has done exceptionally well in managing on the ground and responding to the health concerns of the citizenry.
But let me go back to you then, Dr. Ogunsalo. A COVID surge at Christmas could mean a triple whammy because already there is increased potential for injuries from traffic crashes. And then there's also the potential for violence-related injuries increasing, these injuries requiring hospitalization. What is the worst case scenario you are foreseeing?
Okay, fortunately, like everybody is expecting that the COVID-19 will affect a lot of people during the Christmas. My scientific theory is that this is not going to really happen because the virus has watered itself down from one infection of a group to the other. So what I say is that the first virus that emerged is the primary virus. And then the people who took it on to America, Italy, they got the secondary virus, which was weaker. And then it's now gone to the tertiary virus, which is weak. And I've discussed with a lot of my colleagues. So, but fortunately, I don't think that Cornwall Regional will be bogged up by a lot more COVID cases that they do have. But as an oral and maxillofacial surgeon, having worked at Cornwall Regional and stabilized oral and maxillofacial unit for 3-4 years, I will say that that facility needs to be top-notch to deal with trauma. Right now, I think a lot of cases are being transferred to Cornwall Regional. There is no major private hospital in transfer to Kingston Public Hospital. There is no private hospital with maxillofacial surgery or trauma or emergency, so to say, that will be able to deal with incoming cases. And this is why I am saying that if at 3 years we're still where we are, you yourself, I will say to you, Mr. Moderator, that you are right by saying that we are back to one.
A distinction needs to be made about the healthcare provision and the building. The team on the ground are doing and have done exceptionally well to preserve the services. So the public's interest from a healthcare service point of view has not been compromised. Maybe a few inconveniences because of all that's happening on the compound. The building itself and the suggestion around selling to the university hospital, as I said, is frankly speaking absurd. First of all, the University Hospital of the West Indies is bursting at the seams in terms of the work that it has to do, which is why there's a development plan for the university. The University Hospital of the West Indies is subsidized by the governments of the region, with the Jamaican government giving it over 60 or closer to 70% of its operating operating expenses is given to it by the taxpayers of Jamaica. So I'm not sure on what basis they could acquire Cornwall Regional. And third of all, and fundamental to our policy, we do not have a paid for service except indirectly through taxes. And so Cornwall could not be sold to anyone. We can establish partnerships, and we do from time to time, but it's important to restore the facility in keeping with policy for the benefit. Now, again, I reject the notion that we're at square one, because we're not. There is work that has been done. There are designs that have been developed. There's gutting that has been done. There's a HVAC system now ready to be installed, which is where the problem started. There is significant value that has been created. So I don't want my acceptance and recognition of time delays and cost overruns to be interpreted as it being a total failure. I do think, however, that the lesson that we have learned more than any other is that a hospital is a special purpose vehicle requiring significant capacity and experience, which in Jamaica we do not have. And for this project, as well as the others to come, we need to get capacity that is commensurate with this type of project.
Let's bring in Angela Witter here. As a businesswoman, how do you see philanthropy being impacted this year because of COVID-19?
We have seen how COVID have affected everyone, but I really honestly would like to go back to Cornwall Regional with the minister, because I live in Montego Bay, and it is not a good thing to know that Montego Bay, being a tourist capital, does not have a hospital. And I hear the minister, and I know that everyone on his team are trying their best to do what they have to do. But on the ground, we know that, I mean, this cannot continue. The fact is that Montego Bay has no hospital. My mother took ill and went to Cornwall Regional, and I had to remove her from the facility because they did not have the capacity to deal with her illness at the point in time. And there are many other persons who have had instances of illnesses and have gone to Cornwall Regional and have not been able to get proper care. So living here in Montego Bay and hearing the minister, I mean, speaking that, things are not out of, skelter, they are. And indeed, we would like to hear more from the minister, what other facility, because Falmouth is not capable to assist in the needs and the requirements of the citizens of Montego Bay and environs.
Minister?
I hear Mrs. Witter, and I share, I fully appreciate the concerns that she has raised as a citizen of Montego Bay. And I know she has her pulse on the ground as a significant citizen. So what will happen ultimately is that St. James will have the highest concentration of hospital beds, specialist services, and medical staff than anywhere else, any other compound, not just in Jamaica, but in the Caribbean. And
forgive me, Dr. Tuckton, but there are two very critical elements to give credence to any budget, any project. One, the cost, and two, the timeline. You're not able to provide for us any of those two, which is very critical if there's going to be credence.
No, I can give you an idea of time, of cost, but again, based on what I've been told, I think we've completed phase 1 of the project. We're now going into phase 2, which my understanding is that it will cost just about $1 billion or just above that. And then phase 3, which is the largest phase, which will go to international tender, which will be, I am told, approximately $3 billion. So those are Jamaican dollars now.
So that's good for cost, but timeline?
Timelines, I think we will break the back of the project during the course of next year. I am not prepared to say we will complete it next year because I just can't say until I get a better or a revised technical assessment as to what is at stake.
But definitely in time for the 2025 general election.
Sorry?
But definitely in time for the 2025 general election.
let me just tell you something. I'm not driven by election cycles. I'm driven by the job that I have to do. I'd love to wave a magic wand and get it done right now for Christmas, but clearly that's not possible. So I have to work with what I have to work with. Remember now, we're under a lot of stress. We're in COVID times. This year has been really challenging. I don't want to blame anything on COVID, even though we have been distracted. I have been distracted. But the truth is, we do need some external help to move the process along.
That brings us to the end of today's Gleaner Editors Forum. We would like to say thanks to the Health and Wellness Minister, Dr. Christopher Tufton, Gloria Henry of the Business Process Industry Association of Jamaica, to Dr. Christopher Ogunsalo, Senior Lecturer at the Faculty of Medical Science of the University of the West Indies, Calvin G. Brown, former Chairman of the Board at the Cornwall Regional Hospital, as well as to Angela Witter, businesswoman and philanthropist. My name is Damian Mitchell. Thank you so very much for watching.